Did you think that e-bikes don't require maintenance? Well, guess what? They do. With the new Rawrr Mantis X Pro, we're going to walk through some of the basic maintenance things that you need to do on this bike to make sure that it does not get clapped out. In this guide, we're going to talk about a few things like your spokes, your axles, your gear oil. Yes, you have to change your gear oil. Your chain, your brakes, anything that might need to be touched in the first 400 miles. So if you're new to these bikes, or if you just want to learn how to work on them so you don't have to pay somebody else to do it, this video will be helpful for you. Stay tuned. Chain tension and condition is really important. If your chain bounces around too much, it could damage the frame. Yes, there's a slider on it. That slider is replaceable, but if you've got this thing smacking around, it could damage the swing arm, it could come loose and potentially damage the gearbox, could damage your sprockets. So keeping an eye on this is very, very important. I adjust my chain almost every time I ride because of the conditions that I ride in. Let me show you how to do that first. It is very helpful to have a stand that you can put under the bike to lift the wheel off the ground so that you can spin it by hand. Don't have to get one as expensive as this. If you are on a tight budget, you could use a 5-gallon bucket flipped upside down. In order to adjust this chain, we are going to loosen the axle so that we can move the wheel forwards and backwards, and then use these chain adjusters to push in or out to either loosen or tighten. What we're going to need to do today, because it's already pretty loose, is take this adjuster bolt and pull it that way to move the rear wheel back and tighten the chain. Let's start by loosening that. This is a size 19. You will likely need to on both sides. This one is a 17 on the left side. We don't need to take it off. We just need it loose enough that we can move the wheel forwards and backwards. With the size 12 box wrench, we're going to loosen that lock nut, spin that back a bit, and then use the size 10 box wrench to pull the adjuster screw out. What we ultimately want is we want to have the ability to put about 2 fingers between the swing arm and the chain so that it can have some slack but not hit the mudguard. There are little marks on the swing arm itself. You want to use those as an alignment tool. You can say this is where the axle block stops. What line is it lined up with? And then you go to the other side and make sure that it's straight so that the wheel isn't turned sideways. Alright, now we're good. Let's tighten down that axle. Chain is tight. Then we got to clean it. For tightening the axle, we want to use a torque wrench. This is 48 foot-pounds of torque on the rear axle. There we go. Now we can tighten down the lock nut. Tighten down the lock nuts on both sides and we should be good to go. When it comes to cleaning the chain, you need chain cleaner and what's called the chain brush, sometimes called the grunge brush. The fact that it has 3 sides to it means you can clean it a lot more effectively. I also like to put a cardboard box down underneath the chain so I don't make a huge mess because this does spray a lot. Rotate the wheel as you spray the cleaner on. Making a big mess today. Then take the grunge brush, go back and forth, top, bottom, side to side, try to get all that gunk out of the chain. That way it'll spin more freely. And then I like to go over it with the rag, get all the excess stuff off. Realistically, you want to do this every time the chain gets wet or every 100 miles, but since I ride through the dirt and then I wash the bike, the chain gets wet almost every time I ride. Once you get it nice and clean, you've wiped off all the excess gunk and dirt, go back and put some chain lube on it. Now, I will say, it's best to do this when you're about to store the bike and not go ride the bike, because if you spray the chain lube on and go ride, it's going to fling everywhere and make a huge mess, an even bigger mess than I've already made. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Do you like motorcycles? I do. I love all things 2 wheels. I got street bikes, dirt bikes, electric motorcycles, adventure bikes, all kinds of things on 2 wheels. If you like that kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. So your chain is good. What's your chain attached to? The wheels. Let's check the spokes, make sure that they are still all tight. I have been told that sometimes they come from the factory and they're not as torqued as they should be, so I'll show you a cool trick how to know which ones to tighten. If they're totally off, take it to a shop that can true spoked wheels. Bicycle shops can do that, some motorcycle shops, but if you've never done that before, don't try to true it yourself or you'll end up with like a wonky wheel. This nifty little tool is called the Universal Spoke Wrench. It has different measurements on it, 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, and 6 for different size spokes. So if you have any kinds of dirt bikes, regardless of size, and it has spokes, this kind of wrench will be useful. The spokes, if they're at the correct torque, should ting. You get the ones that sound kind of dead, like that one, there's no ting. This one is too loose. We need to tighten it. Better. There we go. Alright, now that spoke is tight. If you find a bunch of them that are loose, then there's a chance you have a bent wheel. So again, take that to a shop, have them take a look at it. They can true it for you, make sure it's nice and straight. Let's check the other side. You will want to do that same thing for the rear and front wheels. Make sure that they are round, make sure that they are sound. If your spokes are loose and you land on something, it could potentially break the wheel, so that's never a good thing. So make sure your spokes are torqued properly. So your chain is good, your spokes are good. We're talking about torque, so let's talk about torque of other things too. Now, if you built your bike, you know that most of it came pre-assembled except for the front wheel. You didn't have to really torque a whole lot down except for your front axle and your handlebars. If you are buying it from a dealership, they should torque them all to spec. If you built it yourself, hopefully you read the instructions and the torque specs, but I've noticed that a few things are going out of torque pretty easily on this bike. The front axle caps are torqued on. I used the torque specs in the assembly manual, but I already lost one of these caps. I'll put a link below to ones you can find on Amazon if you have that same problem, but make sure you torque these down. There is one on each side and they are 22 foot-pounds. When you're attaching the front wheel, you tighten that down first and then you tighten down the pinch bolts. Make sure your pinch bolts are tight too. One that I've had to tighten a couple times in 100 miles is the swing arm pivot. Now I will mention too, at roughly 30 miles, I had an issue with my rear shock linkage where I could hear it clunking. What I decided to do was pull it apart and see what might be causing the problem. The bearings in the swing arm themselves went bad. They completely seized up and were causing there to be some play. Because of that, I replaced the bearings. I'll link those below too. I didn't film that process because I wasn't sure if that would be something that's common. Haven't heard anybody having that problem, but there is something I do see a problem with. So the new X and X Pro have this suspension linkage. It's not directly mounted to the swing arm. That linkage does have some bushings and bearings in it. Those are not greased. So when you are assembling this, it doesn't come with any grease. I highly recommend taking this apart, packing it with white lithium grease, high temperature grease, making sure that you have these torqued to spec as well. These are all about 24 foot-pounds of torque to make sure that you limit the amount of play that happens within this rear shock. Speaking of greasing bushings and bearings, you also want to put grease on your front and rear axle anytime you remove them, whether that be assembly or if you're changing out your sprocket or your wheel or your tire. Always re-grease those axles to make sure that they're able to move freely. One other thing to note about your shock, I did a whole video on how to set the sag and adjustments for your weight and type of riding. One thing I want to make sure you know about is this lock nut right here. This is for preload. The lower down that is, the tighter the spring is and the higher the preload is. I had my Mini come to me from the factory with this nut all the way up at the top to the point where it wasn't actually touching the spring. You need to make sure that you have pressure on this spring. Make sure you have that lock nut tight on the top of the spring where there's no movement at all from the spring. If you've got these risers on at all, or even if you just mount the bars directly to the top triple, you have a very strong possibility of these becoming untorqued. But you want to make sure that these stay at about 8 foot-pounds of torque. It's not a lot, but you want to make sure that these are tight enough that they don't twist in the clamps. There is a little lock nut in here too at the top of the stem. You want to make sure that that is tight as well. You can use a flathead screwdriver and a rubber mallet to tap that around if you don't have a spanner wrench that fits that. But if that gets loose, the whole front end gets wobbly and it will shake it inside of the neck and you won't have the ability to go at high speeds. If you have the ability to get a torque wrench on this, you're only looking at about 5 foot-pounds of torque. So that's not super, super tight. I mentioned that I have a video where I talk about suspension settings. Definitely go watch that video if you want to learn how to set the sag and other things, but especially on the Pro, You've got this rubber ring right here. Keep an eye on that as you ride. As the spring compresses, as the fork compresses, this will drop down and show you how far down you're actually going. If you get to the point where you see it all the way at the bottom like that, you need to adjust your settings. That means you've got something too soft for how you ride. Tire condition is really important to how you ride your bike. These tires are not lasting me forever, and I'm riding it primarily off-road, but riding it on-road is really killing the tires on this X Pro. Let me show you what I mean. So when a tire is new, the edges are typically very straight up and down to give you the most bite possible when you're hitting the ground. When they wear out, or you ride them on the pavement, you get these little edges start to round over, and even sometimes you see the back end of it peeling up. These tires have 65 miles on them. I don't know that I have that many more rides left on the dirt. The sides are fine, sure, but the middles are getting really worn down. If you're riding this X Pro on the street, I would highly recommend a different tire that has a less aggressive tread. For me, I love the aggressive tread, but I'm starting to lose traction in the sand. I'm gonna start thinking about getting a new tire on this soon. If you're looking for something a bit more definitive to know when to replace your tire, this line right here is kind of like a wear mark. If you can't see that line anymore, that means replace your tire. And on some of these nubs, like this one right here, there's no line. That one's completely gone, this one's completely gone, this one's completely gone. Chances are I slid on pavement where I locked up the wheel and slid and destroyed these 3 nubs because the ones surrounding them seem fine. Not surprisingly, the front tire is still in fantastic condition. You can see the sharp edges on all of these knobs. It's because there's no torque applied to the front. It's just the rear because it's spinning as I'm leaving the turns. The front is giving me traction in the turns, which I need to keep. I anticipate replacing this rear tire 3 times before I need to replace the front tire. In my riding condition, that is. There are 2 points of adjustment on your brake levers, both front and rear, that are not mentioned in the service manual or even the owner's manual. So we know that the brakes have a sensor on them that if you pull on the brake, it'll kill the power to the motor. That's a safety thing. You can either unplug them, you can deactivate them in the app. There's an adjustment screw on the front right here with a little Allen key. If you are having issues where it's not engaging properly, you can adjust it to figure out where it hits that button as you go in and out. If you're running into an error code 21, that means that the sensor is being identified as being pulled in, and you might need to adjust that screw out so it's not doing that. The second adjustment is a little set screw in the middle of the lever right there as it goes into the master cylinder. You can put that screw in or out to adjust how far out the lever sits in its stationary position. If your brakes are soft, you either have air in your line, which you need to bleed it out, and I've got a video for that too, or you can pull this out to give you more throw in the lever, meaning it's further out to start, and when you squeeze it, it pushes in the master more and moves more fluid to stop it. While we're talking about brakes, let me show you how to change the brake pads. There's a little clip on the back. I use my Allen key just pressed up against the caliper and pull up on it, and the clip snaps right off. Try not to drop it like I just did because that thing is so dang tiny. There it is. Use a size 3 Allen key. Do the bolt in the top, loosen that as normal, pull that out, don't lose that either. There is a spring clip that holds the pads out into the caliper. What you're going to want to do is grab your fingers, lift that up. I like to put my finger underneath the brake pads from inside as well so that they don't fall out. Pull this clip out and then you can remove the brake pads. I've seen from a lot of people on Facebook and other forums that these pads aren't the best. I haven't had any issues with them, but I can see now that they're super shiny. That shininess usually means that they're glazed over, and that comes from excessive heat. When they glaze over and they get hot and shiny like this, they don't grab as much as they should. You also want to look for lines. Like you can see here, there's a pretty decent line going all the way across. That means that some dirt got stuck in there between the rotor and the brake pad and started to wear out the material on the brake pad. I'm going to do my best to measure these and find the replacement parts for these. I'll link them in the description below. I don't need to replace these yet, so I have not confirmed that they work. When you go to reinstall the pads, put them together in your fingers like this with a bit of a gap between them. Insert the spring clip between the 2 sets. Squeeze them. That way the clip stays there. See how it's got some pressure to it? And then you can insert them back into the caliper like so. Find your little pin, wiggle the pin through, and then tighten it back down, and don't forget that little safety clip at the end too. The caliper is actually the same on the front and the rear of this bike, so the pads will be the same, the process will be the same. Last thing we're going to cover is everybody's favorite thing to talk about: oil change. Let's change the gear oil. There's 3 screws on the side of the case right here. You can take those out with the T25 Torx. You can use the ones that came in the original kit too if you want. And there's up here a T30. So when Rawrr changed the frame in 2025, they added more bracing, but they made it harder to change the oil. You can no longer really get a socket in there. You have to use a box wrench to get the drain bolt off right here. And there's a little tiny hole in the frame right there to allow you to drain the oil out. One quick thing to note, on both the Pro and the X that I have, when they came to me from the shipper, they were low on oil. I added about 20 milliliters of oil to the Pro already. They should only have 60. So it was 30% lower. I'd highly recommend, if you are just getting your bike or you're just getting started, regardless of how many miles you have on the bike, just drain it and start fresh. Adding oil is not that expensive. This whole bottle will last me, I don't know, like 12, 15 oil changes, and it cost me like $10. So it's worth knowing how much oil you have in the gearbox. I'd recommend trying to clean out that frame spot right there, because you want to take a look at the oil when it comes out and see if it's sparkly, if there's any type of metal shavings in it. Throw a catch pan underneath the bike, try to line it up with the hole. Keep in mind, it is still righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, normal threads, but because it's upside down, when you go to loosen it, you're actually loosening it that way, which seems backwards. Using a size 12 box wrench, you gotta do small turns. It's not super convenient. They didn't do you any favors when they designed this frame. Looks pretty decent so far. You won't see it really come out until you release the vent. There is a bolt on top. Now with the 14, we can undo the vent. This will release the vacuum inside the gearbox. There we go. See, it kind of fills up that little valley right there and pours out the hole. We'll let that drain for a bit. Grab a flashlight and look for some sparkles. You can see little bits of like glitter around. That's normal. That's the break-in. That's why you want to change the oil soon after you get the bike, because it's going to move around inside the gearbox if you don't get that out. That, again, normal. Change the oil. They say within the first 400 miles. I think that's too much. I like to change them in the first 100 miles or less. That way you get fresh oil in there. On the drain bolt, there's a copper washer. Those copper washers are really meant to just be used once. I'm cheap, so I flip them and use them twice before replacing them. Also make sure you wipe off the drain bolt, because there might be some metallic residue on that you don't want to get back inside the motor or inside the gearbox. All right, now that that's drained out quite a bit, let's throw the drain bolt back in. You don't want to crank down too tight on this. I have heard of people stripping this out, so don't crank down on this too tight. I don't have a torque spec to share with you, unfortunately. I didn't see that in the manual anywhere. The fact that you can't use a socket and a ratchet is a good sign. It means you can't do too much with torque. I'm going to hit that with some parts cleaner, get the oil residue out of that. Make sure you use GL4 gear oil. Fully synthetic, manual transmission fluid, GL4. GL5 is what's most commonly sold at AutoZone, Advance, Walmart, wherever you're buying your cheap oil. Do not use GL5. There are brass gears in here. GL5 will cause the brass to break down quicker and destroy your gearbox. Fourth time, use GL4 only, please. This gearbox takes 60 milliliters of gear oil. I'm going to use a large syringe. I'm going to put it in through the filler cap, which is where the vent was. I have a trick. Definitely put the bike back onto a lift, because it'll make this substantially easier. The first time I did this video, the first time I did an oil change video, I didn't know this trick and it took me so long to fill it. Alright, we've got 60 milliliters in here. Somebody made a suggestion, I forget where it was. They said move the gears inside, that way you can just easily put oil in it. So what I'm going to do is, as I'm putting the oil in, it moves the gears inside and allows me to push all of the oil in without having to wait. You do still have to go slowly. You can't just dump it in. But this will be a much faster process than I had last time. This is working so much better than it was. I only added in 20. Let's do a full series of rotations. Alright, we're just going to repeat that process until this is full. This process is stupid. I cannot believe how long this takes. Even with that little hack of getting it going inside the gearbox, it's not enough. This is taking me way too long for what it should take to change the oil. At least I'm making less of a mess this time than I did the first time I did it. So learn from my mistakes, rotate the wheel like I'm doing now. It'll help out a lot, but that syringe is crucial. I'll link that below as well. Last 2 milliliters. Come on. And then be done. Alrighty. Got 60 milliliters in now. Oil change is done. Once I get the valve cap back on. Same with the lower one. Don't torque this down too much. This is a very soft bolt. Don't want to strip it out. Plus it's the vent, so it doesn't need to be too tight. Oil change is completely done. Got to put the side cover back on, obviously, but this bike has been maintained. You did the things you needed to do. You've checked your suspension, you've checked your tires, you've adjusted and cleaned your chain, you've torqued all of the correct bolts that you need to have done. You are safe to go ride. I sure do hope you find videos like this helpful. If you do, please subscribe to the channel. I want to grow this as much as I can so I can help even more people. I've got a whole bunch of other Rawrr content. I'll link that right here. If you've got questions, if you've got comments, let me know. I'll do my best to be as helpful as I can for you. I want to grow this community as much as I possibly can. Have fun out there, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next ride.